So the last video that I did concerned the Uranus-Mars North Node conjunction in Taurus. It was the first of those videos, and it talked specifically about that conjunction. And we talked about the fact that this coming week, because the conjunctions occur on July 31st and August 1st, and indeed are encoded into the July 28th Leo new moon. So when the new moon happens on July the 28th, this conjunction and its squares to Saturn in Aquarius and Mercury in Leo are encoded into this new moon. So we're really going to be dealing with this energy for the vast majority of the month of August, because the new moon energies, it's like sometimes when you have an astrological event, it takes on, not sometimes, it, according to certain schools, the event takes on the color of whatever is going on at the time of the event. And apart from someone's birth date, or, there's a whole kind of section of astrology that is around the best time to do something, where we look at everything that is going on in the skies to determine what's the best time to start a business venture, to get married. Surely, though, on a day-to-day basis, outside of things like one's birth date, the most critically important events would be new moons and full moons. And so we've got to, when we look at the new moon on July the 28th, pay attention to what aspects are occurring at the time of that new moon, which are the approaching aspects especially, that are close, and assume that the new moon cycle of 28 days, from July 28th to the end of August, when we have the Virgo new moon, will take on that color, that period, that lunar month being derived from the word moon, is my understanding. It takes on the color of those transits that are occurring. So, and I'll be bold enough to also to say that whatever happens this week is what gallops us towards September the 8th. So in my last video, and even before when I've talked about the Taurus eclipses on April the 30th of this year and November the 8th, I've marked out April 30th, June 30th, September 8th, and November the 8th as important dates. September the 8th becomes important not only because it's 2 months before the lunar eclipse, and I often see, for some reason, that week and the lunation that occurs around that time, the week before September 8th and after September 8th, might bring up important developments related to this eclipse that then start to expand as we get towards the eclipse on November the 8th. But also, it's just before Mercury goes retrograde again in Libra and Virgo. So you have this phenomenon of, especially for the month of August, things moving forward. For the rest of July and the month of August, things moving forward. But as you head towards September the 10th, then when Mercury is retrograde during the rest of September into early October, things that are in a blind spot will be revealed again. And then we move towards November the 8th, the eclipse then. I would be bold enough to say that whatever happens this week sets in motion, it's almost like, typically for eclipses, I would look to the week of September 8th to set things in motion, going back, of course, to June the 30th and before that to April the 30th. But this time around, I'm going to look to this week with Mars conjuncting Uranus in the North Node in Taurus to set things in motion towards that November the 8th eclipse. So I would pay attention. The other thing that I mentioned with this conjunction is that some of us can expect big things, sure, sudden developments, but for a lot of people, the energy might be internal. It might be inaugural. And when things are inaugural, they may also imply an ending. So things may occur this week in such a way that demand and elicit an authentic response. And so this might be a week when an old way of being ends and a new way of being begins, related particularly to projects, developments that have been growing since about September of 2021. As I said, some of us may feel like something is ending, but it's like getting off at a train station only to board another train when we thought we would be boarding or being on the original train as we head into November and even into next year. the developments keep occurring, but the question is, with this particular conjunction, the question that we're dealing is, and we've already had intimations of this, what is our authentic voice and what is our authentic path? And when will we know if something is going to work or not going to work? We may come across as rebellious or individual, or maybe it could be there's a lot of assertion with this particular conjunction. And this second video was going to alert you to the fact that, and talk about the fact that this conjunction isn't occurring just by itself. The conjunction is squared by Mercury in Leo, where the sun is, and where we're going to have a new moon in now 3 days' time. And in many ways, this particular video and the last video, whatever you know about the new moon is practically being shared here and in the last video, but I'll do a new moon video. And it's being squared by Saturn in Aquarius. Now, Saturn's square to both Uranus and the North Node is not really going to occur. The planets will get close, and then at some point, so it's almost as if Uranus and Saturn are heading towards a square. Saturn is retrograde, Uranus is direct, so they're getting closer and closer, and then at a certain point, Uranus will go retrograde. So they'll never really exactly square each other. And Saturn and the true node, or the North Node, have already squared. But it's still, you know, it's just at that part where even though they're not going to meet, they're still either roughly traveling at the same speed, or at least with Uranus and Saturn, they're getting closer. It's not a square that can be ignored, particularly because the way this is lined up is, let's say you've got Uranus, Mars in the North Node here, you've got Saturn in Aquarius here, and you've got Mercury in Leo here. So Mercury is getting ready to oppose Saturn. It's such an interesting new moon because on the one hand, it has this glorious trine to Jupiter. And a new moon trine Jupiter, I mean, talk about a new moon that is, again, supporting new beginnings. You wouldn't want a lunation to trine anything other than Jupiter, really, for all intents and purposes. If we're just thinking, both in terms, without me getting too nitpicky about is Jupiter strong or weak, or is the moon straight, you know, all that kind of, and which degrees are they, without, irrespective. But at the same time, as we have this kind of glorious new moon, we've got all the other aspects that are worth looking at are squares and oppositions. We've got Venus that just squared Jupiter yesterday and is getting ready to square Chiron in Aries. We've got Mercury opposing Saturn. We've got this most important event of this conjunction between Mars, Uranus, and the North Node in a square to Mercury and Saturn when the new moon occurs. So very dynamic, assertive aspects. It would not surprise me if it is a week of, I'll use the word assertion. The word conflict comes to mind, but there's also an element of conflict resolution. But conflict resolution, as I've mentioned to you in the last video, some of us will stay on the train because we may call an all-hands-on-deck meeting and clear the air and determine where we're at and determine if we can move forward on that original train or not. And some of us, as we head towards the end of this month and during this week, are going to realize the train is coming at a train stop and we need to get off and board another train that is headed in a similar direction, but we're on the wrong train and with the wrong people. Okay? So conflict resolution and assertion, communication is going to play a really important role because it's going to help you determine whether those intimations that you've been receiving towards authenticity and what is real and what is not real and what is happening and what is not happening. Some of us may find that events occur or we take the bull by the horns, particularly after the new moon, even now, you know, to start to get clear on what is or is not going on. And depending on how we feel about it, either get to a place of clearing the air and continuing to move forward, clearing the air particularly related to things that came up with the last Mercury retrograde in May and early June, and then continuing to move forward in a way that might demand a little bit of, as it usually does, understanding and compromise. But in other cases, it may very well be that there's just a clarity that the way things are being done or what is being done does not, much as we would like it to, If we find ourselves in a situation where we are going to pretend to be happy when we're not, or say yes when we mean no, or say no when we mean yes, this Mars Uranus conjunction with the North Node is the ultimate sort of, you know, it will demand that we get in touch with ourselves and speak our truth. Now, I have just recently done a video on Saturn in Aquarius, talking about the Aquarius part of your chart and what the key messages might be. And rather than repeat all that here, I'm going to encourage you to look at it. There has certainly been a need for us to pay attention to Saturn in Aquarius and the Aquarius part of your chart, because whatever lessons need to be learned from a Saturn perspective that pertain to the Taurus part of your chart where the North Node eclipses are occurring this year and for part of next year, and where this conjunction is occurring with Mars and Uranus in the North Node at the end of this week, there's a need for that Saturnian work to support this Uranian North Node Mars work, especially since 2021, when Saturn did square Uranus in Taurus 3 times. So, and as I discussed in, I think, the Saturn video, one would say that is, and I think it's fair to say that on one level it is a clash or a square between convention and authenticity, adherence to a tried and tested way of doing things, and this is what is done, this is how it should be done, and this is how most people do it, and what is right for you. But with Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn is not in Capricorn. Saturn is not playing this is the tried and tested. Saturn is playing what is real here, might be pushing for, even in Aquarius, I'm not going to say the authentic choice, we'll leave that to Uranus, but the Saturn takes on a very different energy from Well, again, it's one of these things that we think that certain things are opposite, but they really are not. Saturn in Aquarius questions convention, conventional thinking, sloppy thinking, incorrect thinking, thinking that is taken for granted, but it may not be underpinned by data. So the ultimate push is still very much towards what is actually going to work for you. This is all, once again, another way of saying conventional astrology may say amazing, massive things might happen this week, and they could, but I think it's very much a should I stay or should I go energy, or I think it's much more a can I actually make this work, or do I get off the train? I think it's a much more individual energy, and I think that there's an assessment of opportunity and a determination of whether the opportunity is truly right for us or not. And if it is the former, it may involve a degree of communication and an attempt to get on the same page, and a desire to see if all parties are telling the truth, are being real. And when all parties are being real, whether everyone's sense of reality can actually work together or not. Because what may be real for one person might be acknowledged as real by someone else, but may not be a reality that they want to live with. I want to spend this money on this. Well, they're being honest. The question is, are you on the train for that, or are you not? Whatever this is, whether it's a family thing or a work thing or whatever it is, it's just an example. And if it's the latter, where someone is decided to get off the train, then it's not an easy... It's a train we've been on since September that we thought would grow. And that's, those decisions where we decide to get off a train and take an extra, they come with a certain amount of anger, and they come with a certain amount of sadness and heartbreak and frustration and all those kinds of emotions. And Uranus is famous, notorious for putting us in touch with our authenticity, but at the same time, then the reason why it's given this kind of rebellious nature is because for a lot of people who are used to us acting a certain way, we start acting differently, and then all those labels start to get thrown, being rebellious, being difficult, being childish, being irresponsible, being blah, blah, blah. And those are just not easy situations to be in, but it's a really important transit. And it has to be paid attention to. You don't want to be in a situation where you have instinctively suspected that it might not work for you, and you realize to your disappointment that that would be true. Here's how the sequence works. Today, Mercury squares Mars. Mercury in Leo, you need to know where Leo sits in your chart, what house it occupies, and what that stands for. Mercury in Leo squares Mars in Taurus. And today, is it today or is it tomorrow? It's tomorrow, my darlings. It's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. Sorry. It's tomorrow. It's the 26th. Mercury squares Mars, and Uranus actually conjuncts the North Node. And just because it's tomorrow doesn't mean we're heading to this. This we've been heading to over the past week or so, if you want to think of it that way. Longer when it comes to the North Node and the Uranus-Mars conjunction. On the 27th, Mercury trines Chiron. I'm not touching the Chiron transits right now. On the 28th, Mercury squares Uranus. So Mercury squares Mars first, and Uranus and the North Node conjunct tomorrow. 28th, Mercury moves a little bit further and conjuncts Uranus. I would imagine that on the 27th, actually, that would make sense. So Mercury squares the North Node. So 26th, Mercury squares Mars. 27, 28, the North Node. 28, Taurus. And on the 31st, Mars conjuncts Uranus, and Mercury opposes Saturn. And on the 1st, Mars conjuncts the North Node. So as we go from today, tomorrow, to the 1st, practically every day, this communication is happening. And the planet that is actually, yes, Mars, and it's basically Mars conjuncting Uranus and the North Node, but we've also got Mercury, more than anybody else, touching all these planets over the next week. Mercury, the planet of communication, understanding what is going on. And when planets square each other, the fastest moving planet, Mercury, needs to do its work in order for the slower moving planets and conjunctions here to effectively be realized. And it all ends when the conjunction is happening in Taurus between Uranus, Mars, and the North Node at around the same time, practically on the same day that Mars conjuncts Uranus, Mercury opposes Saturn. So when planets oppose each other, you could think of it sort of as a full Saturn, but it's not the Sun opposing Saturn, but Mercury opposing Saturn. So there's something from a communication perspective that exposes, touches on, creates a bit of a power dynamic or a struggle, requires integration between Mercury in Leo and Saturn in Aquarius. So all of this essentially means that it will not surprise me if many of us are in conversation this week, trying to determine if a particular situation, if a particular train that we have boarded, once again, since November of last year, whether it is a train we're going to remain on, and if the people who are on it, whether we really want to be on the same train as them and go in the same direction or not. Many of us might find that in this process of having communications, and what is demanded is authenticity from us, might find that we're able to make something work and contribute to it and collaborate in a way that we may not have been able to, particularly since a certain amount of something got known in May and June when Mercury was retrograde in Taurus and Gemini. Gemini people might figure, I don't mean people with an astrological placement in Gemini, I mean the people associated with a Gemini house in your chart might figure somewhere in these conversations. And I'm not going to go into explaining why in this particular video. I've done previous videos on this. And at the same time, whatever it is, whatever lessons, with Mercury opposing Saturn, try to err on the, just be straightforward and direct and try to not be reactive. You can get to the same point without screaming or shouting or slamming the door. You can ask the questions, be clear, maintain your dignity and authenticity, and get to the same point and be able to say, fantastic, then I would love to move forward this way, or you know, I'm really sorry, but I don't think this is going to work for me, in that tone, as opposed to when it's opposing Saturn, remember Saturn's lessons. And the Sun is going to oppose Saturn, and Mars is going to square Saturn in August. So, you know, there's more to come here. Saturn's lessons, where does Aquarius sit in your chart? And where does the sense of discipline and effective action that can get the best possible consequence, the most mature action, be taken that is for your highest interest? So if boundaries have to be set, for example, then can they be set thoroughly in a Saturnian manner, in a complete manner, I's dotted, T's crossed, disciplined, composed, responsive, not reactive? But it is a week of communication, it is a week of assertion, and it is a week that determines how you're going to be headed towards that eclipse on November the 8th, and determines whether you're going to stay and make certain situations work, or whether, perhaps disappointingly, but authentically, you know that something is ending so that you can pursue your authentic path with authentic relationships. Sometimes we stay in situations that we think will get us there when we know that they might not. And the universe disrupts it by saying, there's no way towards your authentic path other than you picking up your knapsack and thinking about the Fool and the Tarot and go down this path. And it might feel dark and brambly, but it's gonna be you who's gonna have to cut through it. Okay, so however that applies to you. I'm not done talking about this conjunction. We've got a lot to observe and deal with and communicate this week. And then, of course, we've got this fascinating new moon coming up. Now, the next 48 hours, you might be resting, sleeping, tired, dark of the moon, wave pulling back from the shore. After the 28th, the wave will get active again, and it will trine Jupiter, you know, an auspicious beginning. The question is, you know, let's say the train is stopping in Santa Fe. Do you stay in the same train? Or I don't know why I made up Santa Fe. I think I'm thinking of Santa Fe, Topeka, and the whatever that song is. Or are you going to switch trains to head in a similar direction but a different destination? And that might very well be the new beginning. All right, we're done. Like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click on the bell icon and the wiggly bell symbol on top to be notified whenever I do new videos. And until the new moon video.